Hi there. In this screencast, I'll be covering the setup of our first ARCore Unity project. In the previous screencast, I went over the tools necessary to build ARCore apps within Unity, including the installation of Unity itself, the Android Software Development Kit, and JDK 8. If you haven't yet installed those, go back and do so before we proceed. Otherwise, let's go ahead and launch Unity. When you first launch Unity, you should see a welcome screen that presents you with projects if you've created some before, or the ability to create a new one. We're going to go ahead and click the New button, and we'll simply name our project ARCore Intro, but you can call yours whatever you want. We'll leave the location the default and the template to 3D. If you do want to save your Unity project onto a different drive that has more space, however, this is where you would specify that location. Let's go ahead and create our project. Now that we're facing our project in the Unity editor, let's go over a few things that we'll need to change. I'm not going to go into detail about Unity itself. There are many great tutorials out there about Unity, and if you haven't used it before, I would recommend going into some of those tutorials. That won't be necessary today, however. I'll take you through each item step by step. You may just simply not know why all of these things work the way they work until you cover some of those other tutorials. So to begin with, the default scene that Unity spawned for us, the elements are hidden in the hierarchy here, so let's expand those. We have a main camera and a directional light, neither of which will be of use to us in ARCore, as ARCore uses its own special camera for targeting our device, as well as using a light that takes into account ambient lighting that Unity is able to derive from our sensors. So the upshot of that being, we need to go ahead and delete these two elements. We can do that by clicking on the main camera, holding down Shift, and clicking on the directional light, and then hitting Delete. Now that we have an empty scene, we want to go ahead and change our build environment over to Android. This is worth doing at the beginning before we import anything so that no assets need to be converted and then re-imported. You can see at the top here, PC, Mac, and Linux standalone is what we're currently targeting, and that's not what we want. So from the File menu, choose Build Settings, and then from the list here, choose Android. Then hit Switch Platform. When you do so, you'll notice that the Unity icon will move from PC, Mac, Linux standalone to Android, and also the title bar at the top will shift to Android, which has already happened. Once that's done, we can jump into our player settings because there are 4 things we need to change in order to be able to compile our project and put it on an Android device. For now, we can go ahead and close our build settings, which we'll return to later once we're ready to build the project. The first thing that we need to adjust is going to be in the Other Settings category over here, and we need to switch off multi-threaded rendering. This is not currently supported by ARCore and Android, and you will get build errors unless you turn that off. The second item we need to adjust in here is package name. Now, Android uses package naming schemes such that each one is identified uniquely by the organization or individual that creates it and the package name itself or the app name itself. We can change these to whatever we want. They just need to be different than the default values. So I'll just say com.mycompany, and then for product name, I'm just going to call this ARCore Intro. The third thing we need to adjust is the minimum API level. Obviously, these old versions of Android, including Jelly Bean, KitKat, Lollipop, Marshmallow, do not support ARCore, so we need to go ahead and choose Android 7 Nougat. Now, in discussions, some people will choose Android 8 or later. There's obviously no harm in doing that if you're targeting devices down the road, but there's also no benefit. And if you were to choose Android 8 here, what it would mean is that your app would not be able to run on any devices that are currently running Android 7. So that wouldn't be a benefit. So always choose Android 7 or API 24 to be able to target all devices possible with our AR Core Kit. The final thing we need to adjust inside of player settings, you're going to scroll all the way down and choose XR settings, and then check AR Core supported. Now that we've done all that, we're ready to begin. We're now ready to import the AR Core SDK from Google. Let's head back to our web browser, and we're going to go to developers.google.com/AR. Choose Develop at the top, and then on the left bar, Unity, and then choose Quick Start for Android. Again, the locations of some of these things may change as Google adjusts their pages, but you can always search for Unity AR Core SDK. And here we see on this page, get the AR Core SDK. This is going to download a .unity package file, which we can access from our Downloads folder. Let's go ahead and switch back to Unity and choose Assets, Import Package, Custom Package. Then go to your Downloads folder and choose the AR Core Unity SDK file that we just downloaded. Hit Open, and after it examines the contents of that file, you'll see a list. This list is all of the elements that are inside of that Unity package. Now there's a lot of example elements in here that we may not need later on, but for now, let's go ahead and leave everything checked and just hit the Import button. Now that that's done, you'll see in the Project tab, under the Assets folder, which we can expand out here, you'll have a few directories that have come up, including plugins, Play Services, and Google AR Core. Google AR Core is where most of the assets are contained that we're going to be using. So the first thing that we want to do is actually get something that we know should work onto our phone and build, so that we can identify if any of the issues that we have down the road are related to our hardware setup or related to something that we've done in Unity. Now that we've imported the AR Core SDK, we're just about ready to get an AR Core app onto our device. But before we can do that, we need to make sure USB debugging is turned on. If you're already an Android developer, you can go ahead and skip past this, as nothing's changed from Android Studio. If you're new to all this, however, go ahead and follow along, and we'll get your phone set up. Now, yours may look a little different than mine, depending on what device you're using and what version of Android. This is a Google Pixel with Android 9, but hopefully this will be similar enough across devices that you'll be able to follow along with me. You want to go into your system preferences, or settings, for Android. Usually that's available from the drop-down menu at the top. Then you're going to choose System and About Phone. And at the bottom of this, sometimes in an advanced menu, at the bottom you'll see Build Number. If you tap on this, it'll actually tell you that you need to press it a number of other times before you become a developer, quote unquote. Mine is not saying this because I'm already a developer, as I've been using this phone for a while. Once you complete that process, you can go back, and under the System menu in Advanced Options, a new menu will be made available to you that's Developer Options. When you launch that, you're going to scroll down until you see an option for USB debugging, and you want to go ahead and switch that on. It'll warn you it's intended for development purposes, and you want to use this to copy data between your computer and your device. Obviously that's what we want to do, so we're going to go ahead and say OK. Now that that's done, we can leave our preferences, and when we plug our phone into a USB cable, we'll see that USB debugging is connected. And that's it. We're ready to go and start building an app that we can put onto our Android device. Now our development environment is completely set up, both on our device and on the machine we're developing from. Before we start building our own stuff, however, we're going to want to use Google's default scene just to make sure that everything's set up correctly and that we're able to build ARCore apps and run them on our phone. So let's go ahead and save our empty scene that we've created here, and we'll return to it later when we're ready to build. When you choose Save, Unity by default puts us into our project folder in the Assets. Go into the Scenes folder, and then we'll just call this ARCore Scene. You can call it whatever you want. Now our empty scene is saved, so we won't be prompted to save it when we go ahead and load Google's scene. Now in our Assets folder on the bottom left, you'll see Google ARCore, and this is where all of the ARCore SDK assets are contained. Click on that, then choose Examples, Hello AR, Scenes, and launch the Hello AR project scene. What we're looking at now is an example scene that uses the ARCore framework, and we'll simply be able to look around our environment and allow us to place a prefab that Google has created inside of this as just an AR sample project to make sure everything's working. So at this point, we want to make sure that our phone is still plugged in to our USB cable and connected directly to our computer. And then we're going to go ahead and go up and choose Build and Run. You can also hit Control-B. This is going to prompt us for a place to save the APK file. APK files are Android packages. They're basically the file version of the apps that run on your phone. So we have to save an APK first before it can be transferred to our phone to run. Again, this can go anywhere. I just tend to put mine into the core project folder, and we'll call this app. Then we'll hit save. And now the build process will begin. Depending on the speed of your computer, this can take somewhere between 2 and 5 minutes. And then the app will go ahead and launch on your phone, assuming that your phone is unlocked and you're looking at your home screen. If you haven't already done so while this builds, I would recommend unlocking your phone. And you may see a dialog prompting you whether or not you want to trust this computer. Go ahead and say that you do want to trust it. Otherwise, you'll receive a build error. If that completes successfully, you shouldn't see any errors. You'll simply be back in your scene. Now, if we take a look at what's going on our device, it'll be prompting you for access to the camera. You obviously need to allow this for AR because the camera is what the device uses to look at the scene around you. So hit allow, and immediately the device will begin to display a grid if it's working successfully, demonstrating the surfaces that it's finding. And then once that's complete, we can go ahead and tap anywhere on that grid and it will spawn an object for us. And that's it. We're now successfully building an ARCore project. Congratulations on making it to the end of a very complex and somewhat convoluted process. Android development Unity has a lot of moving pieces, and it's likely that along the way things didn't go quite as they showed up in the tutorial, and you've had some errors to debug. I encourage you to stick with it. The kinds of things that you can make will absolutely astound you, and I look forward to helping you along the way.